Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us in the Spiritist Talk series promoted by the United States Spiritist Federation every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. And a special thank you to the International Spiritist Council for broadcasting this program on their YouTube channel. Today, we have a special guest, ALUIZIO Porcado Rausch, who will discuss the subject of Sublimation, a book by Yvonne. But before we turn it over to ALUIZIO, let's do our opening prayer. So please, if you can, close your eyes. Let's just take a moment. We thank you, dear God, for your presence in our lives each and every day. Please bless this presentation. Please bless our efforts to grow and to learn. Please bless the journey each and every one of us is on in our spiritual progress. May we enjoy life each and every day as an opportunity to grow and to learn and to be connected to our higher selves. Please bless the journeys that this time period has put us through. And may we do our best to make sense of where we are and who we are, and to begin to understand a little bit where we might be going. We thank you, dear God. We thank you, dear Jesus. We thank you, our dear mentors, for your guidance, your wisdom, and your insights. Amen. And now, let's welcome ALUIZIO Porcado Rausch. How you doing, ALUIZIO?
Doing great, Peter. Thank you.
Great. So before ALUIZIO brings his words of teaching to us, please allow me a chance to introduce him more formally. ALUIZIO is a tax attorney, has a JD degree and a master's degree in law from the Federal University of Minas Gerais in Brazil, and an LLM degree in international taxation from New York University here in the United States. He is a worker of Spiritist Group of New York, where he currently coordinates the Monday online prayers meeting. He is also a worker of Centro Espírita Emmanuel Felipe Santiago in Belo Horizonte in Brazil, where he participates in mediumistic meetings and other activities. Thank you for being here, ALUIZIO. Remember, everyone, please send in your questions because we will have a question and answer session after his talk. ALUIZIO, it's all yours.
Thank you very much, Peter. And also, thank you for both the presentation and the prayer, right? I personally think that prayer is such an intimate activity, right? That even when we do it publicly, like you just did, it reflects our inner feelings, our inner thoughts. And so thank you, man. It's beautiful, so beautiful, beautiful prayer you put out there. Thank you. Okay. So thank you, everyone, for joining us today in our conversation about sublimation. Maybe if you hear some background noise, I apologize for that. My nephew, he's a little bit young and crying a little bit, but not a problem. Okay. And okay, so sublimation. Thank you. Thank you for joining me, right? And I would also like to thank the United States Spiritist Federation for inviting me to speak about it. And let's get started, right? First, sublimation, love, cause and effect, and reincarnation, right? The word sublimation, when we think about it, and it's the title of the book, right? That I translated with the assistance or the permission from Federação Espírita Brasileira, right? And this, when I was doing, or after I finished and Fabi published it, people were asking me if it was about something in physics, chemistry, or something in psychology? And I said, no, not at all. It's, I mean, not directly related to any of those topics. And the reason why they were asking me that is because sublimation in physics or in chemistry, and I looked this up before while I was preparing for this, is a term that refers to the transition of a substance directly from the solid to the gas state, right? And its opposite would be deposition or desublimation, right? So it's this definition in physics, in chemistry, pretty much reflects a transformation or a transition, a coming from one state to another. But this is not what we're going to talk about today, right? And in psychology, maybe we're getting closer to it, but it's not exactly that too. But in psychology, sublimation is a term that refers to a mature type of defense mechanism in which socially unacceptable impulses or idealizations are transformed into socially acceptable actions and behavior, possibly resulting in a long-term conversion of the initial impulse, right? And I guess it was in Freud's structure or way of thinking, it represents maturity and civilization, in the sense that that deflecting sexual instincts into acts of higher social valuation, right? In higher social behavior. Okay. So what we are actually going to talk about today is not exactly the sublimation in physics, sublimation in chemistry, or in psychology, but the sublimation in spiritism, or better saying, in spiritual development, right? And I guess this part of the, oh, wait, went blank. There we go. So this part of the text, and I guess you all can see it, I think it brings more information about what this sublimation means. And I'm going to read it. They reunite today and separate tomorrow in the course of reincarnations, only to feel awful because of the other's absence. They once again reunite to idolize each other even more, in an ever-growing impulse of love which tends to sublimate itself in the spiral of evolution. And that you can find in chapter 5, which is called Evolution, right? So in Spiritism, or maybe in the line of thinking that Don Yvonne, Charles, and Leo Tolstoy were trying to convey here, sublimation is the act of transforming love into something, or transforming one type of love or one manifestation of love into a more developed, in a higher level of love, pretty much, right? And this is why I going back, I think that love, cause and effect, and reincarnation is pretty much the sum of it, because it is because love in its many representations, manifestations, through cause and effect, and with assistance of this amazing tool, which is reincarnation, evolves, develops, sublimates itself, right? Okay, great. A little bit about this translation, right? It's this book right here, right? It's called Sublimation. It's and the cover by itself, I think it was a great work by Fabi, because I mean the picture is amazing, the production is amazing. So I mean I'm extremely thankful for their level of care and I mean professionality, right? It's a beautiful cover. Okay. Okay, the book in Portuguese, the original is in Portuguese, right? It's called Sublimação. It's pretty much the same thing, right? And it was published the first time in 1974 by Federação Espírita Brasileira. right? The medium, the author of this book is Yvonne do Amaral Pereira, right? And the spirits that actually wrote the book are Leo Tolstoy. You probably heard about this guy, and Charles, right? Okay. This translation here, it was first published in March 2021, so it's pretty much fresh out of the oven. And you can nowadays find it pretty much everywhere, like Fabi website, well, and all the others. And here I would just like to say special thank you to Jusada Korngold. She did the proofreading, or the second, I did the translation, and she was kind of catching my mistakes and offering comments and suggestions. So this final work is definitely, I think it's great, and it's definitely a lot due to her work and care. So, Jussara, special thank you to you. And of course, thank you to Federação Espírita Brasileira, who actually allow me to do this translation, right? Because, yeah, so you guys are awesome. Okay, authors. We're going to talk a little bit about Dona Yvonne right now. This is one of her pictures that we have. Right? She's awesome. And okay, Dona Yvonne do Amaral Pereira, she was born like in Christmas Eve, 1900. Rio das Flores, that's in Rio, Brazil. And she died in 84, March 9, right? In Rio, the capital of the state. Dona Yvonne, she's very well known in Brazil because she was an amazing medium, right? Her collection of books, and we will talk a little bit about them a little bit later. It's a great collection of books and different stories, different topics. She was a very serious medium, and there are some stories about her and Chico that I would definitely like to talk about today, but unfortunately, we won't have the time. Maybe some other day I will just talk about her and her spiritist, mediumistic path. Let's put it like that. But, well, today I just wanted to say thank you to Dona Yvonne. The other author we have, this guy, Leo Tolstoy, it's the Russian author, right? That's pretty much it. He was born in September 9, 1828. I'm probably going to butcher the pronunciation, but it's called Snaya Poliana. I think it's a small town in Tula, Russia. And he died in November 20th, 1910, right? A little bit after Dona Yvonne was born. In Astapovo, Riansan, that's also, I guess, a state or specifically the jurisdiction there, and in Russia as well. Charles is the last member of the trio here. We don't know a lot about him, even though through Dona Yvonne's mediumistic work, we definitely get a lot more information about this guy, right? But we don't have. We won't have a picture to show here, so that's why I put the question mark on his face. But yeah, never mind. Okay, these are the authors. Other books by Dona Yvonne. She wrote a lot, and these are not all of them. Okay, I have a bigger list here. I couldn't fit all the covers in this screen. There's only so much space, right? But these, I guess, are the most read or the most cited, the most relevant books. And probably you guys already heard or even read Memoirs of a Suicide, the first one right here, right? This one here. And let me see if I can pointer options. Laser pointer. Here we go. Awesome. Okay. So this one here is Memórias de Suicida. It's pretty much one of those books in Spiritism that you got to read. You definitely got to read. But for me personally, it was extremely hard to, right? It's translated into English, so go knock yourselves out. And also, Nas Telas do Infinito is also translated so far. And now we also have Sublimation. The other ones, so far as I know, they are not translated. And actually, these three here are on the works. I'm working on the translation of these three here, but it's going to take a little bit longer, right? Translating, as I've recently found out, is not easy. It takes time. So, for it to be a good work. So, yeah. So it's summing up, right? Don Yvonne has a lot of books, extremely precious mediumistic works. If you haven't yet, please go and read one of those books, one of the books by her. Different authors, spiritual authors, are in different books, but you're definitely going to see Charles often, and Memories of a Suicide is it's Camilo Cândido Botelho. I think it's the only one he writes with her, but I may be mistaken, but never mind. Okay, so yeah, go for it. Okay, getting back to Sublimation specifically, right? This book that we're going to talk about today. This book, it's composed of pretty much 6 different stories, right? Those stories, and I'm going to talk a little bit about them right now, more later. But the first one is called Obsession. The second is about, it's called Immortal Love. The third is Sublime Destinies. And the fourth is Karta Alexeyevna. Again, butchering the pronunciation. Yeah. Okay. So these 4 first chapters or stories, they were written by Leo Tolstoy, right? And it is interesting, and we're going to talk about more later, that if you read maybe War and Peace, Anna Karenina, some of the books Leo Tolstoy actually wrote when he was incarnated, you would notice the same flavor, the same. It's hard not to notice how similar this style is. Maybe these stories are shorter than what Leo Tolstoy used to write when he was alive, right? But the pace of the story, the narrative, the flow of the story, it's I think it's unquestionable, right? Just commenting on it. Then we have Evolution and Nina, right? These last two chapters or last 2 stories, they were written by Charles. Charles is today we won't talk a lot about him, but he has a special relationship with Don Yvonne. They were related in past even remote lives. So their spiritual connection is extremely strong. It's a very close spiritual bond. And because of that, I guess the quality of the book or the stories is rare, because is like Chico and Emmanuel. They were also very close together spiritually. And I think that's even a precondition for a good flow of the story and for a good communication, right? Because as we all study here in Spiritism, maybe not everyone that is listening to this conversation here is a Spiritist. Doesn't even matter, right? But as we study in Spiritism, the closer or the stronger the connection between the spirits, the easier the communication gets, or even more pure, in the sense that there is less noise, there is less disturbance in the communication. So I think Charles and Don Yvonne here did an amazing job, right? Okay. And I think one other thing that I would like to talk about all of those chapters, and maybe that's a signature trace of Don Yvonne, is that she always opens the chapter with a citation of Allan Kardec's work, right? The stories and the chapters, however you want to call them, they are not a replication at all of Allan Kardec's work. But I think the purpose here, or the selection of those specific stories, they were selected because they convey, when you take out the plot pretty much, a very deep and important spiritual lesson from a spiritist perspective, right? So when Don Yvonne correlates that message with a topic, question answer in Spirit's book, or something in the gospel according to Spiritism, or even in the medium's book, you definitely see how it comes together, right? And why I'm saying that, it's because the purpose of spiritual or spiritist literature is not necessarily to entertain, right? Even though we all like a good spiritist book, right? The entertainment of it, right? When you read and you cannot stop reading, it's amazing. But the purpose is not just to pass time, right? It is to convey something. And Don Yvonne makes sure, when she relates those different chapters to Allan Kardec's work, that we get it, right? That we understand. Maybe she was even trying to put in a story what actually the message meant, right? So yeah. So this is it. And one more curiosity about these two chapters, this Nina and Evolution, written by Charles. And Don Yvonne says that in the introduction, or in the beginning preface of the book. Those two chapters, they were actually written decades before the publication of Sublimation, right? And I think this is another lecture that we should all have in mind, is that Don Yvonne waited a very long time to actually publish those two, right? Those two, they do convey some personal experiences in her past lives, and even in Charles' lives. And she narrates there that that when she was mediumistically putting down the stories, she was, seeing or remembering the scenes, the feelings, the emotions, she was reliving pretty much, right? And that takes a tool, right? It's not easy. The mediums out there will probably agree that the process of communicating is not without effort, right? So for her to not only transmit those stories, but actually to publish it, stories that convey her intimacy, her life, right, in past lives, it's not an easy job. So yeah, I think that's something we also have to have in mind, that it's not because we put down a text or a story or a mediumistic message that we should go and run with that and put it out there directly. No. I think it's the job of every good medium to study what the communication tries to convey, even present it to other people so they can give comments and criticize, because sometimes none of us are free from the risk of obsession and other things, right, that we study in Spiritism. So it is always a good practice, I guess, to have patience with our mediumistic work. Okay? All right, moving on. And the core element in all of those stories, as I said before, is how love, through the law of cause and effect, and assisted by the tool of reincarnation, sublimates itself. It starts maybe in a situation of human love, of passion, like couples, and it sublimates itself. The events in life, the difficulties, they go on showing that maybe living that experience at that moment is not the best, or not meant, or has some obstacles for our spiritual development, right? So yeah, this is the core of it. All right, moving on. Leo Tolstoy. And I would just like to read with you guys a few excerpts, because Leo Tolstoy writes a presentation, like an introduction in this book. And I think it's also extremely interesting what he writes there. So he starts with, before abandoning to earth my carnal spoils, I promised God and myself that I would write something to counter suicide, right? Okay, so this guy is saying that, well, I died, but the work didn't end there, right? Several times after I passed, I was grieved by the news that one, then another, and again another woman, carried away by the passion of human love, had copied the gesture of a certain famous hero from one of my romances, right? And I think here he is referring to Anna Karenina. It's a very famous book by Leo Tolstoy. And I mean, this guy is saying here that he was so famous and he wrote so well that actually this gesture of suicide in one of his books inspired other people, and he says other women here, but pretty much other men as well, to commit suicide. Awful, right? I mean, you try to do a good work and you do a good work, and you never know how your ideas, your efforts will be taken or interpreted by other people, right? If the offenders, or the people who committed suicide, were inspired by the stories told by me, I felt guilty for being cause of that misfortune. And I even came to regret the inspiration that led me, right? This guy did not intend anyone to commit suicide, but some people did. And after they did, my mind, conceiving literary suicides that modeled other suicides, involved me in this tormented wavelength, right? This is all taken from the presentation. Why did I take those excerpts from the presentation? I mean, to talk to you guys at this very moment. My intention here was to maybe try to talk about this ability that we all have as spirits, as human beings, of mentally projecting our thoughts. And by doing that, this inherent capacity to create, we actually mold matter, right? Even if in a more subtle way. And when we do that, we actually interfere in the world, right? I think maybe we all know how difficult, right, it is to wait. I'm gonna go back. Yeah, this happened when I was. We go. Sorry for the technical problem. Okay, we're back. So basically, in Spiritism, I think it's one of the key elements of it is that with our minds, or when we in our spirit, we are inherently able to change or to affect the world. We see that many times in Chico and André Luiz books, right? When you read the collection, Life in the Spiritual World, several times you see how mental projections, they actually take form, right? Take form of parasites, or take form, or dark matter, or not in the physical sense, guys, but things that actually affect us. At the same time, mental projections full of light, when he talks about the petals falling from the sky when they were praying, or projections of light, those are all mental projections from the higher planes, interfering and bringing good inspiration to our lives, right? So Chico and André Luiz talk about that all the time. Chico and Emmanuel, they also talk about it. They have a specific book that covers this. It's Thought and Life, is also translated. So if you haven't, definitely got to read this one. And even Dona Yvonne herself, Memories of a Suicide, it's, what is it if not a detailed study of how the mental projection of someone who committed suicide reverberates throughout decades, right? Even I don't know, even more than a century, I guess it could be. So, and what we are talking here is that, we don't know the remote lives of Leo Tolstoy. We definitely, I don't know if he, and it doesn't really matter if he committed the act himself, but he is saying that even by merely conceiving the act in his mind, put it in paper, and more or less inspiring other people to do it, it was already enough to involve his mind in this tormented wavelength, right? It's right here. Conceiving literary suicides involve me in this tormented wavelength. So the 4 stories are actually, I don't think it's necessarily the only way, but the way that a spirit that felt guilty for using art in a way that, not that he meant it, but caused damage, he was trying to fix it, pretty much, right? In the four first stories in this book is Leo Tolstoy, I guess, try to come clean with respect to his own acts. He's guilty not in the sense that he intended it, as most of the times we don't commit mistakes because we want to, right? But he, like all of us, ignorant as we are, we go on through life, we do our thing, and then we realize we could have done this or that better, right? So I guess this is a great lesson for an amazing writer, an amazing spirit who is trying to get better, right? Okay. So now we're going to get to the actual stories themselves. I try not to bring any, I try not to spoil it, the book for you guys, but also the intention here is to, I guess my intention is to make everyone eager or more curious to read it. So I'm definitely going to talk a little bit about the stories themselves, just briefly. All right. So obsession is the first one. And the story is pretty much framed in a letters exchanged between 2 friends, right? That's why I put this picture here of a woman writing a letter. Okay. So we pretty much see the story from the perspective of these 2 women, right? What one say to the other one. And one thing for you to know is that basically the first woman is in a hospice, right? It's in a asylum, I guess. Maybe it's a better word. And she is narrating what she sees in that place. I mean, if it's the time here is the beginning of the 20th century, maybe, or even the middle of the 19th. So I guess you guys could guess how conditions in an asylum or in a hospice were back then. If even today they are not ideal, I mean, I think that back then they were, I mean, they were even worse, right? People were getting lobotomized, shockwaves, and I mean, all kinds of weird things going on. So this woman is there. She's definitely a medium. And mediumship here is actually not being so helpful to her because, well, and she is there not because she's a medium. Let's put it like that. But something happened because something happened. I'm not going to tell you guys what happened because then it will be too much. But something happened that brought her there, that she was put in there. And she narrates that story, kind of asking help for this other friend who is outside, maybe trying to get her out. And just a little excerpt from what she conveys, right, in the letter. I'm going to read it. There he was, half body, outside the grave, not able to stand up and free himself from the pile of dirt and stones that held him. His eyes were frenzied, haggard, his mouth open as if struggling to inhale air without being able to. His hands clenched, grabbing the edge of the grave, and his face was so white and squalid that it actually looked like the face of a ghost. Yeah, it's a young woman writing a letter. Okay, so personally, I think that this first story is maybe the darkest one. I mean, it's a little bit scary. I gotta say. And it's funny because I was thinking about it. It's funny that I mean, some of us spiritists, like myself, we are scared of ghost stories, right? Of horror stories. I mean, seriously, guys, afraid of ghosts? I mean, it could be. I mean, I mean, it's our bread and butter, right? As a spiritist, mediums and mediumistic meetings, it could be. I mean, seen as a paradox, but actually, no. I personally hate horror stories. I cannot withstand. I just cannot watch them. I really keep clear of horror stories, books, and movies, especially, right? Because I guess when you see the real thing, you don't want to see that as entertainment, right? It's not funny at all. Okay, but why I'm saying that is because this story definitely has a little bit like a darker mood to it. Because I mean, it's someone in an asylum, and I mean, what we just read, it's not the lightest thing for you to see, but it's not a horror story, so there's not a problem. You're not gonna get nightmares for reading it, okay? And it's definitely much lighter than Memoirs of a Suicide, so don't worry about it. At the same time, it has some strong images, and I guess of all of them is the one that shows love in a least developed of or evolved manifestation, right? And maybe it's not it's not about let's put it like that. It's maybe it's not without reason that this story came first in the selection of the six, because maybe there's a progress, and I think that there's definitely a progress in the in the messages or in the stories. The further you go, the more you see characters having suffered before, now being able to manifest a higher level of love, pretty much. So this one is definitely, I think, the downside of being too attached, to blind to physical love, I guess, and not being able to correlate that with the predicaments, I guess, of mediumship and of life, right? When things don't go the way we want them to. Okay, now we get to immortal love. I personally want one sip of water. All right, so I personally love this story because, I mean, I love plants and, I mean, nature, everything. And in this story, many times the Leo Tolstoy talks about the lilac tree. People reading underneath a lilac tree and the smell of the lilac tree, and I mean the colors, amazing. So I just wanted to share this picture of a chair underneath the lilac tree, right? And I'm going to read a little bit of the from this story. You should rather consult your own heart, your own intuitions, Count Philip Filipovich, and you will find him. It was not in vain, my poor friend, that you were the chosen one by law of reparation to write this singular thing to the greater public. Honestly, the plot in this story is just amazing. It flips. It really moves around and gets you, I mean, into the story. This is not a dark story at all. It's a very actually inspiring one, but and you definitely get a more like a sense of like Leo Tolstoy styles when he was alive, because it touches upon social relationships and differences in social class in Russia, maybe, and even European life in the early 1900s, right? It's definitely a great story, and I cannot get into much detail here, even though I wanted to. But it's even if you are not a spiritist, and if you don't, I don't know, believe in what was going to be narrated there, the images depicted by Leo Tolstoy here are just amazing, especially when he talks about the lilac tree. So yeah, go for it. Chair on the lilac tree. Okay. Chapter 3, or third story, Sublime Destinies. This one, if the past one was, I mean, talked about more about this old Russia in which class distinction and hierarchy and I don't know, maybe royalty, nobility, and peasantry, they were conflicting. This one, I guess, is especially so. It brings a bigger flavor of this, and it's about I mean, it gravitates around this very specific character, right? This odd character, and I selected this excerpt that narrates how he dressed and how he dressed and presented himself. I think it's amazing. So he looked like he was 60 years old and dressed himself oddly, wearing very large pants made of crude cloth, black, tucked inside a pair of boots that reached the middle of his shanks, and a tunic also oddly large and equally black, adjusted on the waist by a belt from the same quality, which he fastened with sloppiness, destitute from any vanity. Over the head he wore some sort of a cap made of the same black textile, or more accurately, a kerchief tied as a cap or a turban. He had a long hair and a beard that reached his chest, both grizzled, right? So I looked up, I tried to find the ideal picture, and all I could find was this picture of an old Cossack. You see the black tunic or the turban and the black dress. It's not exactly like this, but the long beard. And Sublime Destinies is I think it's probably my favorite story here. It has a very interesting plot. It's like an adventure, pretty much, right? It's like a story of an impossible love, pretty much, and the scenery is so peculiar, right? It's in the Caucasus, in Russia, like a faraway region of Russia, I guess back then especially. And I mean, it's the story is just so enticing that you should definitely, get to it. All right, next one, Carla Alexeyevna. This is a beautiful story. It's really light to the heart, and it's I guess a story full of light, I guess. And it's the last one of Leo Tolstoy's stories. And if the first one was darker because it represented a type of love that was completely undomesticated, right? Unyielding or disrespectful even. This one, Carla Alexeyevna, is about love when it reaches sublimity, I guess. When it reaches acceptance, and it really has understood the purpose of the obstacles in life. The Our Lady of Kazan, it's one of the key, images in the story, because there's I think an overlap between the representation of Lady of Kazan, Our Lady of Kazan, and the main character here in this story. Yeah, okay. So I'm going to read a little bit. Cold sunbeams came in through a close-by window, which stained glasses, displaying the multicolored silhouette of the Lady of Kazan, filtered suggestive reflexes that framed Carla's singular figure. That's the heroine in this story, right? You try to imagine, picture yourselves this big one of those church windows, right? Colorful, with the light coming in a beautiful morning, the light coming in, and you look at this person, right? This here was already an older lady, bathed in that light, and then we get to understand what her story was, what happened to us, and the amazing lecture or understanding message we can get from it, right? Okay, just beautiful. Okay, evolution. Now we get to the first of Charles' stories, and this one has a special characteristic to it because it depicts, not in the same detail, but it depicts the flow of a couple, and that includes Yvonne herself, throughout the ages, throughout millennia, actually. It narrates with, or at least it gives hints of how this relationship throughout several reincarnations was changing, right? So it's not the perspective from only one person, but actually the perspective of two people, right? And how difficult and full of obstacles this development of the soul is, right? And that's pretty much for all of us, right? And I'm gonna read from it, I guess. 19 centuries. Look, this is, 2 millennia. 19 centuries of suffering, work, and accomplishments had transformed him. He had died, suffered, fought, worked, loved, served, conquered himself, and renovated himself for God. Pretty much, he has reincarnated many, many times. He had progressed. He had come to know the hardship of progress through all the social classes. He had educated himself. He had completed himself, right? So I think it's a message also for us striving spiritists, right, in this path of spiritual development, that, guys, we got to be patient, right? We definitely got to slow down in our anxiety, because even though we know that we should every day wake up with the intention of being better and being kinder and more tolerant and more respectful and more loving, even for spirits that we admire today, I mean, it took a long time. So let us respect ourselves first and foremost and pace ourselves, right? Understanding that the spiritual development is not something that comes in a rush, right? I guess if we try to do it in a fast pace, we're definitely going to make so many more mistakes, right? And I guess if something that the higher level spirits definitely have is patience, right? So, and I'm speaking for myself here, that's something we always have to improve, I guess. Okay, just sacred spiral. Yeah. Now we get to, this is the last chapter. So Nina. I think if I'm not mistaken, this is the longest story in the book. And it is about a specific past life of Charles and also Don Yvonne as well. And it's a very, very lively story because it takes place in Madrid, Spain, in the 1800s, something there in the middle, right, or even beginning of the 20th, right, century. So it's a very lively story. It's already more urban context, and also, I mean, it's amazing. So I just put this picture of a gypsy woman because in this specific situation, Don Yvonne is incarnated as a Jewish. I mean, there's a mix there, Jewish gypsy woman. Yeah, and I'm going to read it again. A chill of unusual emotion run along the sensitive fibers of the young nobleman, followed by the inexplicable distress and discomfort. He displayed a gesture of surprise, which was not unnoticed by Constancia. So, who is Constancia? Who is Nina, right? And who is this young nobleman? I mean, the story is amazing. A burdensome sensation supervened, and it was as if he asked himself, in the intimacy of his soul, touched by affliction, but how can she be here in this sordid place? Why? Why is she here? No, he cannot be. This is a crime. I cannot agree with this, right? This is this young nobleman thinking when he was seeing Nina for the first time. All right. And then later in the story, there's another part that I would like to read with you guys. Suddenly, it's a different scene, right? Suddenly, one of the mediums present started to write quickly, and Don Ramiro saw that it was Nina who, by his side, gave him her thoughts. So the human tool would transmit it to him, Ramiro. She was supported by an instructing entity and wrote with ease, right? So again, this interplay with the plot, the story, and a deep, maybe unseen when you just get hooked up by the plot itself. This guy here, or Charles here, is narrating a mediumistic meeting, right? How the maybe the addressee or the person the message is for is there, and this person has mediumship visual, so he can see the spirit there. And then a medium, a psychographer, is in contact with the spirit or the communicating spirit. And then this communicating spirit is being supported by a higher level spirit, so the communication has less turmoil, less noise. This person, so the spirit, the communicating spirit, which or who is not that developed spiritually, let's put it like that, is able to convey his thoughts in a better way. I mean, we've seen that many times in André Luiz and Chico, and this comes from an unrelated source. So, guys, I mean, this book is just amazing. I definitely, not because I did the translation, but definitely because, I mean, if you read Portuguese, you can always read in Portuguese, but for the English speaking audience out there, I mean, honestly, it's an amazing book. Opa. Okay, so just to finish it, I will be back later, Captain Nowak, and I still need to tell you certain things regarding the laws of God, about which I already had the opportunity to meditate, right? This is from chapter 3, Sublime Destinies. I guess it's my favorite. And when this part happens in the book, I was personally there. No, don't go away. Don't finish the story. Please stay here and tell me what are those other things regarding the laws of God that you have already been able to meditate about. I mean, I want to know. I had that curiosity about more, about maybe a deeper understanding of Spiritism. And I hope that with this presentation, I was able to inject into you also the curiosity to read the book. Thank you very much. That's it. Guess you're muted.
Yeah. Sorry. Thank you, ALUIZIO, for a very inspiring presentation. Tolstoy's one of my favorite writers, and his comments on religion in particular. He wrote a lot about religion, and it's very inspirational to read that. He had an influence directly on Gandhi, for instance. Okay, I believe we have some questions. The first one is it a trial for people to learn how to love without becoming devastated when a romantic relationship does not work out?
Is it a trial for people to learn how to love without becoming devastated when a romantic relationship does not work out? I mean, I speak for myself here, right? And I think that it's definitely a trial when relationship doesn't work out. After all, we are social beings, right? In our lives, we are always connected to one another. So when a romantic relationship in special doesn't work out, we all get devastated. It's hard, right? But I guess the point here is that we all are eternal spirits, right? We all have a long story and a lot of things to learn. If for any given reason a relationship doesn't work out, what has to work out, and that's I think the spiritual development that takes place, is the respect and the civil, I mean, the way we treat one another, right? It's not just because a romantic relationship didn't work out that we are allowed to express our rage or our, uh, worst sentiments and expressions out there, right? We always have to treat the other person as a human being and ourselves as human beings. So, yeah. And I
Very.
think if we do that, that's
Mhm.
the actual challenge of spiritual evolution, right? It's not how to try to be a saint, but how to be a good human, right? That's, I guess.
That's a great way to think
Live in the
about it.
world. Yeah.
Absolutely. Mhm. Okay, our next question. Following up on the above question, does the tool of reincarnation provide the experience needed to deepen love in any type of relationship in subsequent incarnations?
All right. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for the question. Thank you for the first question as well. Those are amazing questions. I definitely think yes. The answer would be yes. And in chapter 5, the story number 5 called Evolution, maybe we can get a better glimpse of that from a spiritist perspective, right? Because specifically there, and it's again, there's a story about Donna Yvonne as well, many of her past reincarnations. You see actually a couple throughout the ages, right? Meeting and like finding themselves and then losing themselves, committing mistakes and choosing one thing and then offending the other one, but then coming back together. It's a love story, but it's not necessarily a traditional love story, maybe from Hollywood point of view, because it's not about a happy ending that they are together. Because guys, death comes for all of us, right? So there will be an ending for that specific relationship at that point of time. The point here is developing respect, love, care for one another, no matter how we come, no matter in which bodies we are, and how we relate. So if we learn to be, or if we develop spiritually through subsequent incarnations and relationships with the same spirit, our lives are not, or the purpose of reincarnation is not to learn how to deal with that person in a specific, right? Our lives are so much bigger and broader, right? We have to deal with so many things, learn so many things, that the purpose of reincarnation, I guess, is to better relate to everything, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
And sometimes we can accomplish a lot with somebody and sometimes only just a little bit. So it
Exactly, right?
depends.
Because it don't that doesn't only depend on us, right, Peter? It's
Right.
the other person is as independent
Mhm.
and free-willed and intelligent and powerful, and it's we are all equals, guys. So
Absolutely.
right?
Okay, next question. Is it a trial for people to learn how to love without becoming devastated when a romantic relationship does not work out?
I think that was the first one, maybe.
Yeah, I think you're right. Here we go.
Okay.
Okay, here's the question. What is the significance that Leo Tolstoy participated in creating the book Sublimation?
Okay, I'm not sure if I understand the.
I think what it's asking is of all the spirits that could have been involved in this book, is there any significance that Leo Tolstoy was the one that participated?
Okay, I guess I mean, yes, other spirits could have participated as they have in
Mhm.
other books by Don Ivone, by Chico, by Givaldo, right?
Mhm.
We what is being narrated here, maybe as a development of Allan Kardec's teachings, is not at all exclusive to Don Ivone, right?
Mhm.
Or to the spirits communicating. But throughout our reincarnations, I guess, we kind of get together to, that's the law of affinity, right? With this or that spirit. So we become more familiar with this person of that person's challenges, difficulties for, well, many reasons. I'm not sure what is the relationship specific between Leo Tolstoy and Don Yvonne in the past. I honestly don't know if they were related. But in other books, Don Yvonne actually narrates that she, in some of her remote lives, was a Russian individual. She lived in Russia for a while. I think she narrates that she was, I think, a peasant for a while in a like older, remoter life, more remote life, and then maybe later she was, I think, nobility or something like that, living with a lot of I mean, comfort. So I think that experience in Russia gave her maybe the affinity or the mental affinity or the let's put it, the background, so she could better connect with Leo Tolstoy, who also had a well, life as a Russian, right? So the minds were more intertwined because of those maybe common experiences. So there's a significance right there. And I think the other point was that Leo Tolstoy, as we read or as we saw in the right in the beginning, he wanted to at least help, right, preventing suicide or to counter suicide, because as he narrates, through Anna Karenina, he might have actually influenced people to commit suicide. So he, as a spirit, had this burden of trying to counter suicide. And when we study more of Don Yvonne's life, we understand that she committed suicide at least twice in more recent lives. So in her life as Don Yvonne, she was extremely connected to this wavelength of suicide and helped many of our friends that were in the same wavelength. And of course, helped herself. After all, Memories of a Suicide is probably the best book about suicide from a spiritual perspective. So
Absolutely.
I think there are connections, I mean, many significance there.
Yeah. And I know that book sometimes scares people, but it's absolutely
Oh, it
worth
scared
reading.
me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because when I was
But
reading that for the first time, Peter,
yeah.
I mean, for at least the beginning, right? It's harder.
Oh,
It's,
yeah.
the
Absolutely.
scenes
An opening.
are right. Like the first chapter or the first story in Sublimation. It's not that it's a story. It's not that it's a horror story per se, but the scenes that it narrates, they are
Right.
scary, right? So
They
it's
are.
hard to read. But then as you go on and you see the change, how darkness evolves into light, and it's amazing.
Yeah. It's a very life affirming book, ultimately. It's very positive
Absolutely.
at the end.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Do we have another question? Yes. Leo Tolstoy must have felt very guilty, in other words, about the suicide of the young woman. But are artists responsible for the way people might choose to react to an artistic work?
Okay. I think
You
that's an amazing.
commented on that a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's an amazing story. But and I honestly would like to remember the parts of the Spirit's book or Medium's book, Gospel According to Spiritism, by heart, like the answers and numbers, because I think it's always amazing when we can pinpoint the message there. But when we read Allan Kardec, we understand that responsibility is directly related to our level of consciousness, right? So the point here is Leo Tolstoy did not intend other people to commit suicide, right? He just wanted to write a good story, and writing a good story. That's what I mean. That's what he did, right? Many times. But the point here is he was not aware that his work would have the effect that it did. So it's not that he is responsible in a way of maybe he used the word guilt. And when we say guilt, we relate back to, maybe Christian, old Christian, or even Catholic concepts of it. The point here is not that you are responsible. There is a God, there is a judge, and is putting the finger, like pointing the finger to you and say, oh, you should have done that. It's not that. It's that by creating something, he connected to other people. Through his work, he influenced other people. So spiritually, there is a bond. And when you create a spiritual bond, people exchange impressions, feelings. It's like a channel, right? And when we connect with someone through love, we all know that we experience good feelings. If we connect with someone, that then later commits suicide, what we get from this spiritual hype, it's not that great, right? So the point here is not being responsible or guilty in the sense that someone outside was blaming him, but actually understanding in a very deep way the interplay of cause and effect in his own actions.
Right. Okay. It's a great answer.
Thank you.
Next question. How can we protect ourselves from obsession?
Ooh, that's a tricky one. Again, Medium's book, right? There's a whole, I guess, chapter or several chapters about it. Even more technical explanations about obsession. And I guess that's one of the key points here. In the first story, obsession, there was not something that the main character was being victim of, but actually she was the perpetrator. She was alive. She was a medium. And because of her not very, I guess, educated love, she was obsessing some other spirit in the story and committing not so great deeds, right? So the thing about obsession is it's not one-sided, right? And it's not only perpetrated by spirits or disincarnate spirits. It is also done by us, and we can do it with other people that are alive. So how we can protect ourselves from obsession, I guess, is trying to be a better human being. I think that's the key, right? Trying to have fruitful lives, trying to, study, pray always, right?
Absolutely.
And try to relate to good people, try to avoid addictions, right? I think obsession is also related to addictions, of chemical addictions, of sentimental addictions. So, yeah, I don't have the key. One answer to that is just that. Yeah.
Those are all good points. So yeah, a lot of.
Thank you, Peter.
Okay, we have one more question.
Okay.
How would you compare the major themes of these short stories by Tolstoy versus Charles?
Okay. In the sense how different they are, or
how are they? I think what it's saying is how are they similar? How are they different? Any major themes that stand out?
Okay. I guess as I try to say, the core theme here is love, right? All of those stories, they talk about a love relationship of some sort, right? And if there's a core, if they all connect, the plots are different. Even the type of language Leo Tolstoy uses a more like an older version of Portuguese in the original. Even the vocabulary is a little bit like outdated, I would say. And Charles has a more updated and more, I guess, fluid for our standards. And I try to more or less maintain, but I had to change a little bit in the English, right? Because that's part of the work of the translator. But so the connection is love, right? Love relationships, and how the obstacles in life, they don't exist actually, or they don't take place to actually prevent us from loving. That's not the point. The point is to develop better ways of loving, less selfish ways of loving, more charitable ways of loving, more fraternal ways of loving. Especially because if we are, and that's also in the I think that's my Sublime Destinies is definitely, I guess, my favorite one, is that love per se, or even love in a human condition, like a couple's love, it's not bad per se, not at all. It's amazing. It's part of human evolution. It's, I mean, but the point is, after several reincarnations, if that bilateral love or exclusive love does not develop to or in the sense that if we don't learn to live in the absence of that other person, right? For
Mm-hmm.
some given reason, because circumstances of life moved us away, or we had a an accident, and we could maybe not be able to provide a person the happiness, or I guess person would be deserving.
Mm-hmm.
If we don't learn to live in the absence of that exclusive relationship,
Right.
love can actually make us, that type of love can actually make us more selfish, right? We
Mm-hmm.
don't open up our eyes to the afflictions of other people right out there. And
Right.
it's part of a human spiritual evolution to, of course, be more charitable and more fraternal.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's people certainly want to be able to love as deeply as possible, but they also need to be separate individuals too. So,
Exactly. And I
yeah.
think that's also true, not for like couples love, but also motherly love,
Mm-hmm. Oh,
fatherly
yes.
love. I mean, even brothers and sisters, right? I
Mhm.
mean, all our different perspectives of love that we all need to develop, I guess.
Absolutely. Okay. Believe we have a comment. Yes, from Francisco Diaz. And Francisco says, many couples are together because of obsession instead of real love. Interesting. It's only about one part and not the development of both. It's more likely to be an obsession. Hmm.
Mhm. Okay. Okay. Maybe as a provocation, Francisco, and thank you for your comment.
Yeah.
I honestly don't know if obsession and love are that different, right? Maybe obsession is just a bad version of love, a very bad
Mhm.
version of love. Because if we are all bound by affinity,
Mhm.
which is actually bound by love, if that, as again, if that connection is not developed enough, we
Mhm.
get a bad version of it. So yeah,
Right. I mean, people get together for positive reasons, but sometimes people get together for negative reasons too,
exactly.
which they need to work on. But
Exactly. Maybe it's
which,
it's actually the suffering that comes from that bad version or that bad connection
right.
that you're talking about, Peter, that
Mhm.
actually allows them to develop, right?
Yeah, and it could be
Sometimes.
very much a lesson in itself. So,
Yeah, exactly.
thank you, Francisco. That was a nice
Thank you.
comment.
Absolutely.
Okay, so thank you, Aloiso, and thank you, everyone who watched this live and those who have been following our weekly talks. Next Saturday, November 20th at 11 a.m., we will have Roberto Watanabe, and the theme will be the Medium's book, Philosophical and Moral Consequences. And now, before we end our live, Aloisio, can you please say a final prayer for us?
Absolutely, Peter. Thank you.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Supreme intelligence, our Master, Jesus Christ, beloved spiritual friends, guides, family in the light. We thank you for the opportunity of being here, of talking about some topics, some ideas of the destiny of love, how love, through cause and effect and reincarnation, develops itself, reaching sublimity. We thank you for the kindness, respect of our friend Peter Hayes, of other people involved in this event today, to the United States Spiritist Federation, to all the hearts, all the minds that were part of this conversation, and a special thanks to Dona Yvonne, Charles, and to Leo for your amazing work that inspires us and brings us so much light. May we all be blessed, protected, and inspired to continue reading, to continue studying, to continue struggling, to be better people, to be more respectful, more tolerant, kinder, and most of all, to be able to love more deeply in a more developed way, with more understanding of the consequences of our actions, of our missions, and of our choices. With that, I ask permission to close this conversation. Thank you. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, ALUIZIO. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Bye-bye.